Jennifer Grey, frozen in time as Baby, the girl who danced her way into movie history. But behind that smile was distance, silence, and a co-star she never really knew. For years, she let fans believe the fairy tale, that she and Patrick Swayze were close, that their chemistry meant something real. But now, decades later, Jennifer has finally broken her silence. And what she just admitted about Patrick, about their tension, their pain, and the truth behind those iconic scenes, has shattered the illusion. Because they weren't in love. They weren't even friends. And for Jennifer, pretending they were, hurt more than anyone knew. Before she ever stepped onto that now iconic stage at Kellerman's, Jennifer Grey was already carrying the weight of a name, a legacy, and a silent pressure to prove herself. She was born into Hollywood. Her father, Joel Grey, was already a star, a Tony winner, a Broadway legend. Jennifer wasn't just trying to succeed. She was trying to matter in a world where people already assumed they knew who she was. But she was different, quieter, softer. There was a vulnerability to her that never fully left her face. She didn't light up a room with bravado. She made people lean in. And early on, that made her hard to cast. Too subtle, too raw. She studied at Dalton, trained at Neighborhood Playhouse, and slowly started getting bit parts. Small appearances, commercials, voiceovers. But then came Ferris Bueller's Day Off and everything shifted. In a sea of loud characters, her dry delivery and unimpressed glare made people take notice. Still, it wasn't until Dirty Dancing that Jennifer Grey became a household name. To the public, it looked like a dream, a role tailor-made for her. The sweet, awkward outsider who blossoms into someone fierce and unforgettable. In many ways, it mirrored Jennifer's own arc, finally stepping into the spotlight after years of quietly existing in the background. But inside, Jennifer was still searching. She later admitted that even during filming, she didn't feel like a star. She didn't feel powerful or sexy or special. She felt unsure. Unsure of how long this moment would last. Unsure of what people really saw in her. "I never thought I was the pretty one," she once said. "I never thought I was the leading lady." Hollywood had a template for beauty, and Jennifer didn't fit it. She had something different, something less polished, more human. And even when Dirty Dancing catapulted her to international fame, the pressure only grew heavier. Suddenly, she wasn't just Joel Grey's daughter. She was Baby, and people expected her to be exactly that, forever. Fans would stop her on the street. They'd quote lines. They'd ask what it was like to fall in love with Patrick Swayze. And she'd smile, always smile, because that's what they wanted. The fantasy, the romance, the chemistry. But behind that smile was something else. A question she didn't yet have the courage to answer. Because the truth was, her experience making Dirty Dancing wasn't the fairy tale people imagined. It wasn't full of laughter and closeness and playful rehearsals. It wasn't love at first sight or even a natural friendship. It was complicated. And for Jennifer, being loved by the world while feeling disconnected behind the scenes created a fracture she didn't yet know how to name. She kept it to herself. For years. Because to speak the truth would be to break the illusion. And for someone who had spent so long trying to be seen, to be liked, to be chosen, breaking the illusion felt like betrayal. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. And Jennifer Grey, years later, would finally find the words. When Dirty Dancing began production, no one expected it to become a phenomenon. It was a small-budget film with no major stars, no studio hype, and a script that teetered between coming-of-age drama and summer fling fantasy. But lightning struck. And at the center of it all was Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze. On screen, they were perfect. Fire and softness. Rebellion and restraint. Baby and Johnny. The kind of couple that made audiences believe in love again, if only for 90 minutes. But off-screen, something didn't click. Jennifer later admitted that from the very beginning, there was tension. It wasn't anything loud or dramatic. No screaming matches or walk-offs. But there was a current, a subtle, steady friction that neither of them could shake. Patrick was the kind of actor who thrived on control. He was disciplined, trained, endlessly professional. He hit his marks, perfected his choreography, and expected everyone around him to do the same. Jennifer was different. She led with emotion. She was spontaneous, vulnerable, unfiltered. She wanted to feel her way through a scene, not count the steps or rehearse the same moment a dozen times. The clash was inevitable. She once said, "He'd get frustrated when I laughed too much during a take, when I'd break character or cry when I wasn't supposed to, and I would shut down when he got sharp. I felt small around him." There were moments on set where their silence said more than their dialogue ever could. He'd roll his eyes when she missed a step. She'd turn away when he got impatient. And yet, when the camera rolled, it was electric. The director, Emile Ardolino, saw it too. He knew they weren't connecting off-screen. He even pulled them aside and pleaded with them to find common ground. Not for the sake of the movie, but for each other. And for a while, they tried. There are stories from the set that fans love to repeat. How they finally laughed during a rehearsal. How they worked through the famous lift without stunt doubles. How Patrick later defended Jennifer's performance in the press. And they're all true, in pieces. But the full picture is more complicated. Jennifer once revealed that the iconic lake lift scene, arguably the most beloved moment in the film, was only done once. Just one take. Because she didn't want to practice it. Not because she was being difficult, but because she was afraid the magic wouldn't survive repetition. That was always Jennifer's fear. That if you looked too closely at something beautiful, it might fall apart. So she leaned into the performance. She gave everything to the character of Baby. Her uncertainty, her longing, her ache to be seen. And somehow Patrick matched her. Even when they didn't speak between takes. Even when they didn't laugh at the same things. Their bodies told a different story. Together, they created a love story that millions would carry in their hearts for decades. But Jennifer knew, deep down, that what they gave to the screen was never real between them. And holding on to that secret, while the world cheered for a romance that didn't exist, was lonelier than anyone could imagine. To the world, Patrick Swayze was the dream, the ultimate leading man. Charming, graceful, rugged, but gentle. He rode horses, danced like a professional, and made every woman watching believe in second chances. To Jennifer Grey, he was something else. He was magnetic, yes, powerful, talented beyond measure, but he was also intense, unyielding, private in ways that made real connection nearly impossible. And Jennifer, still young, still finding her voice, never quite knew how to meet him halfway. "He was so strong," she once said, "so sure of himself, and I was still trying to figure out who I was. He had this energy that filled a room. It made you want to follow him, but it also made you feel like you were always catching up." She admired him. That much was true. But admiration isn't the same as intimacy. Their work together on Dirty Dancing forced them to spend hours in each other's arms, but rarely in each other's world. There were rehearsals, camera blocking, pickups, endless hours of choreography. And yet, Jennifer later admitted, they barely spoke about anything real. "We never had long conversations," she said. "Not about our lives. Not about who we were. I don't think I ever really knew him. It wasn't hostility. It was distance." Patrick was married, deeply in love with his wife, Lisa, and Jennifer respected that. But she also felt at times like she was being measured against something she couldn't touch. Like he had walls that were never meant to come down around her. He would get frustrated with her instincts, her emotion, her tears, her hesitations. And she, in turn, would shrink from his impatience. There was no cruelty, but there was coldness, a lack of softness, a space between them that never closed. "I remember one day on set," Jennifer recalled, "I was struggling with a scene. I couldn't stop crying. And he just stood there, not unkind, but not comforting either. He waited for me to pull it together, and I did. But I never forgot how alone I felt in that moment. It wasn't that Patrick was a bad person. In fact, everyone loved him, cast, crew, directors. He was generous, professional, always prepared. He brought his best to every single scene. But Jennifer needed more than professionalism. She needed connection. And what made Dirty Dancing so painful and so powerful was that she had to create intimacy where none truly existed. I had to pretend to fall in love with someone who barely looked me in the eye when the cameras stopped, she said. And that broke me in ways I didn't understand until much later. Still, Jennifer never spoke about it. Not for years. Not while Patrick was alive. Not while the world still carried the illusion of their perfect pairing. Because for all their friction, all their distance, she respected him. And when he died, it left her with a grief she didn't expect. Not just for the man, but for the space between them that had never been bridged. For the words left unsaid. For the friendship they never built. And for the truth she'd been too afraid to tell. For decades, Jennifer Grey played along. She smiled through interviews. She nodded when fans gushed about her chemistry with Patrick Swayze. She let the world believe in the love story they had created because it meant something to them. And because, for a long time, she couldn't bring herself to say otherwise. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, she finally confessed. People loved the movie. They loved us. And I didn't want to break that. But it wasn't the audience she was protecting. It was herself. Because saying the truth out loud, that she and Patrick had no real friendship, no emotional connection, no private bond, felt like erasing something sacred. It felt like admitting that the most beautiful moment of her career had been built on something empty. And that was a grief she wasn't ready to face. She kept that secret close, even after the movie's success faded, even when her career stalled, even when her name was slowly replaced by others, and the spotlight moved on. The truth stayed inside her, locked away with every unspoken word and every lonely moment on set. Until Patrick died. That's when the silence became unbearable. When Jennifer heard the news, she was flooded with emotion. But it wasn't simple grief. It was regret. Regret that they had never had the conversation. Regret that she'd never told him how isolated she felt. Regret that, even in the most intimate scenes, they had been miles apart. I cried, she said. But it wasn't just for him. It was for everything we didn't say. Everything we didn't fix. In the years since, Jennifer has opened up slowly. Not out of bitterness. Not to tarnish his memory. But because she no longer wants to carry the weight of pretending. Because for so long, her silence wasn't just about protecting Patrick's image. It was about protecting her own sense of belonging. She had become Baby to the world. And Baby was loved. Baby was seen. Baby had the kind of romance Jennifer never had in real life. To admit it wasn't real meant stepping out from behind the one role that had made her unforgettable. And that's not easy. Even now, Jennifer still speaks about Patrick with respect. She acknowledges his charm, his presence, his talent. But she's also honest about what they lacked. There was no deep bond, she said. We were two very different people doing a job, and we did it well. But off-screen, there wasn't much there. It's not the story fans want to hear, but it's the truth. And in telling it, Jennifer has reclaimed something she lost a long time ago. Not just her voice, but her right to define her own story. 'Cause Dirty Dancing may have been a love story, but Jennifer Grey's truth is something far more human. When Patrick Swayze passed away in 2009, the world mourned the loss of a beloved icon. Tributes poured in. Co-stars shared memories. Fans revisited Dirty Dancing and wept for a man who had become more myth than actor. And in the midst of it all, Jennifer Grey stayed quiet. It wasn't that she didn't care. Quite the opposite. But the grief she felt was complicated. Layered with sorrow, regret, and something harder to name. She wasn't just mourning a man. She was mourning a memory. A chapter of her life that had never been as magical as it appeared. A partnership that felt profound on screen, but left her feeling invisible off it. I was deeply sad, she said later, but I didn't know how to speak at the time. I didn't feel entitled to that kind of grief. Because Jennifer knew what the public didn't. That theirs wasn't a friendship. That while Patrick was beloved by so many, he had never really let her in. And she, in turn, had never fully trusted him with her vulnerability. They were two actors doing a job. And they did it beautifully. But after the cameras stopped, they went their separate ways and stayed separate. Still, there was a moment years later, quiet and off camera, when Jennifer finally spoke about what Patrick meant to her. He was a real cowboy, she said. Strong, graceful, fierce. He knew what he wanted, and he brought it every day. We weren't close, but I respected him. And I think he respected me. It was the most honest she'd ever been. No romantic gloss, no Hollywood fairy tale, just the truth, clean, painful, and final. Jennifer now speaks about Patrick not as a lost love or a dear friend, but as a symbol of something bigger, the cost of pretending, of performing intimacy when none existed, of building something beautiful with someone who always felt just out of reach. She admits that, for years, she couldn't watch Dirty Dancing. It hurt too much, not because she missed him, but because the film captured something she never actually got to live. A closeness that was only real for the audience. It broke me to fake it, she said. But I think maybe that's why people love it so much, because you can feel us both reaching for something that wasn't there. Now, when fans approach her, when they ask what it was like to fall in love with Patrick Swayze, Jennifer doesn't lie. She doesn't smile and nod and tell them what they want to hear. She says, "We weren't friends, but we gave you something special. And maybe that was enough." It's not the fairy tale, but it's real. And for Jennifer Grey, finally speaking that truth has become its own kind of healing. Jennifer Grey didn't come forward to rewrite history. She came forward to reclaim it. For decades, she let the world believe in a love story that never truly existed. And in doing so, she silenced her own pain, her confusion, her isolation, her truth. But now, with the distance of time and the clarity of age, she's finally said what needed to be said. That love on screen can be a performance. And sometimes the performance is what makes it beautiful. She and Patrick Swayze were never close, but they created something unforgettable. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it still matters. Because the ache was real. The longing was real, even if the love never was. And for Jennifer Grey, telling the truth at last was the bravest scene of all. For more of the latest news, check out this video.